This is my story. I have known about it for a long time. Different versions have been discussed on the same subject, on the same thing. Although of course everyone writes it with different details. I have my business on the road that leads to a dam. Before me the same place was occupied by another family business, and I frequented it a lot, so I have spent my whole life in the area. I feel that it is less and less crowded. The first time I heard about it is when I was a child. I was visiting the place that I told you about, and the son of the family from the business next door used to play with me. We were the only children around, so it was inevitable that we became close. I remember that on one occasion, as soon as he saw us arrive, he approached our van. He made signs for me to hurry down. He was desperate. When we got out, he started talking to all of us, including my parents, that his brother had just seen my father. Incredulous but curious about the boy's obvious emotion, he was asked to calm down and explain to us what he was talking about. It turns out that this boy's older brother was a young man who was around 15 or 16 years old. At that time he used to go running very early before going to school, almost every day at a time, when most of the time, as it was not yet dawn. On this particular occasion, when passing on the narrow two-lane road, on the curtain of the dam, he heard a sound that caught his attention. It was a kind of sigh, heavy, that seemed to come from the top of the structure of the dam gates, about 15 meters high. He stopped trying to observe in the dark, but he only saw what seemed to be a silhouette. He thought it was his imagination and kept jogging. What he heard later was an even stranger sound, like something big unfolding. What he saw when he turned around was the almost imperceptible dark silhouette of the figure with outstretched wings, with enormous wings. He ran as fast as possible, until he ran into a truck. By the time these boys told us the anecdote, the young man was already at home, hours later, perhaps with a fever and scared. It took many years for him to run again. Over time I was burying that story in my memory. That is, many things are told out there. Stories of apparitions in the area, or of a woman in white at certain hours and in the dark of night, but years passed before I heard anything about this creature again, and around 2005 to here I have heard stories again, and more frequently. What I am going to tell you about happened years ago. I was chatting with a friend who worked at the police headquarters. He is a few meters from the entrance to the dam. I hadn't seen him for a while, so we stayed talking even after 10 at night. After saying goodbye, a truck arrived at full speed and went into the delegation's parking lot. Due to security issues that are being experienced in the municipality, evidently he alerted all the police, but they were very scared boys. They got out of the truck asking for help and talked about what had just happened. The young people had gone to the area of the dam at that time, almost dry, and they stayed a while longer. After nightfall, they heard a loud noise near them where the music was, and a small bonfire. They turned off their sound and tried to investigate with the lamps among the bushes. They thought that someone had approached, and they knew with what intentions. One of the girls who were with them suddenly screamed, and they all pointed their lamps where she was pointing. They described having seen a winged figure of more than 2 meters, which moved at an impossible speed through the bushes, and then they did not see anything. They lost sight of it. But they heard the sound of enormous wings moving away. I heard what they were saying, upset, scared to death. Then they made them go to the headquarters, and then I said goodbye to my friend who came in with the boys, although he had already finished his lathe. Days later he visited me at my business. I asked him how drunk the young people were, I believing that the alcohol had made them hallucinate, and he told me that only one of them had taken, and that it was a deeper issue than it seemed. Despite how crazy it may sound, there were several reports about it, never taken seriously even when they were by the same police elements. I already had to see it, he told me. I had to see the gargoyle. What are you talking about? I told him, with a nervous smile, waiting for him to tell me it was a joke, but he continued even more serious and told me this story. A while ago we went to the baptism of a child from a mate. The party was in the same town very close to here. So some of us left the cars outside the delegation. When we were leaving, I went back to work for my car. All my colleagues who do not have a car asked me to please take them, and I accepted because they live in the same area. I was passing through, one of them got in next to me, and the other person, a secretary, in the back of the car. We moved forward talking animatedly towards the dam, still in a happy mood. When we had more or less half of the dam and I braked on it, I stopped. At a complete stop, we all kept quiet trying to know what we were coming from. About 80 meters from us there was what seemed to be a crouching person, but you couldn't see his head in any way. It seemed that it was covered by a black blanket that was too dark despite being illuminated by the car headlights. It was a completely black figure, which seemed measuring 2 meters, despite the fact that it was distant. I changed the high beams and it flew, I swear it flew, as if it were a huge animal. But even in the dark, we noticed that it had a humanoid shape. It was the gargoyle that we had already heard so much about, which we all believed was a story. At the end of his story, I noticed that a client was looking at them carefully. He had listened to the whole story and then he also told us about his experience. Due to fate, perhaps by chance, from that moment I began to find out about more sightings from many people who in this area have stories that are really more frequent. Last year they must have seen it at least 5 or 6 times. As far as I know, there are also who says that he steals cattle, especially goats, from the area. There are those who say that they have seen him come out of the gates of the dam. Some boys recently told my son that according to them they saw her carrying in her claws what appeared to be a child of 2 or 3 years. Although of course I think that if something like this had happened the news would have been very strong and sound. I share this because I would really be interested to know if there are more people with similar stories, and they have also told you this type of houses. I hope you liked it and thank you very much if you decide to share my story.